Hey everyone, thanks for being here today. As you can see, I have Joey Landreth with me today. Thank you so much, Joey, for joining us. And
Such a pleasure.
And so we're going to do today. Wow, getting 48 people online, doing great. So today, as everybody who chimes in and watches the Brooklyn lockdown, which have changed to Brooklyn lockdown conversations. I'm trying to be all professional on this. I'm going to like bringing in people that they do a short lesson or as long as they want. We hang out and ask some questions and talk about guitar. So Joey Landreth is one of my favorite guitar players and singers. Totally psyched to have Joey on the show. And it's been awesome to have all the people we've had on because I get to talk to people who are friends and people who I really love their playing of. So we have a few things to start off. We have the tip jar, which of course, musicians are out of work, so if you want to help out Joey, good money goes to him. And if you look at all the links here, you've got some stuff we want to sell. It's Bandcamp. You've got the Brothers Landreth records. You've got your solo records. You have a new pedal, which we'll talk about. So I just want to mention all those things first that you guys can see in the links. And if you want to help out, this is a direct way to help out Joey in this time where you cannot tour at all, can you?
No, I cannot.
I was like, guys, let's do it.
My wings are clipped.
I know. It's what's your cat's name? You got your cat, Rory?
That's Rory.
Okay, cool. Oh.
Yeah, I don't know if you heard her. She sounds like she's being tortured all the time, and that's just.
I had a Siamese cat who was like that. It made that kind of sound, So.
Oh God.
All right, so great. So
I don't notice it until there's 48 people watching on the internet, and then all of a sudden it's, why are you doing this now?
It's part of the whole thing. All right, so what you're going to do, Joey's going to play some songs for us, then we're going to talk about a little guitar lesson. So I'm going to leave it to you, Joey, and we'll get back and do some talking.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. So, okay, I'll play a couple tunes, one tune off of my recent record, and then a cover tune. For the folks out there who aren't familiar with me, my name's Joey Landreth. I'm from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, and I play in an open tuning. So if you're watching my hands going, what the hell's going on? That's why I play an open C. So anyway, this is a tune off my last record. This is called Cryin'. You say that it's over, you say that you're moving on. The song in your head keeps playing on and on. This bittersweet melody calls you back again. Somehow you always forget. You always end up crying, chasing a love that's dying. You always end up on your own, lied to and wrong. You always end up crying. There's something about letting somebody let you down. You don't gotta push when you're getting pushed around. Don't gotta run, don't gotta hide it. Somehow you always deny it. You always end up crying, chasing a love that's dying. You always end up on your own, lied to and wrong. You always end up crying, crying, crying. You end up crying. Ooh. You always end up crying. chasing a love that's dying. God, you end up on your own, lied to and alone. You always end up crying, crying. You end up crying. Thank you very much. I think I'm clipping here. Thanks.
You keep going, and then we'll get back and talk. I just want to leave this stuff to you.
Okay, sounds great. This is a cover tune that I've been playing for a while. This is an old Ray Charles tune, and that's it. It's a Ray Charles tune called "Hallelujah, I Love Her So." Sorry. There we go. Am I centered? Let me tell you about a girl I know. She's my baby and she lives next door. Every morning before the sun comes up, she brings my coffee in my favorite cup. And that's how I know. Yes, I know. Hallelujah, I just love her so. When I'm in trouble and I need a friend, she'll stick right by me to the end. Everybody asks me how I know. I just smile and say she told me so. And that's how I know. Yes, I know. Hallelujah, I just love her so. I call her on the telephone and I tell her that I'm on. The time it takes to get the door, there she is knocking on my door. And in the evening, oh, when the sun goes down and there is nobody else around, she kisses me and she holds me tight, tells me, Daddy, everything's alright. And that's how I know. Yes, I know. Hallelujah, I just love her so. When she calls me on the telephone and she tells me that she's all alone, by the time it took to count to 4, there I am knocking on that door. And in the evening, when the sun goes down and there is nobody else around, she kisses me and she holds me tight, tells me, darling, everything's alright. And that's how I know. Well, yes, I know. Hallelujah, I just love her so. Hallelujah, I just love her so. Hallelujah, I just love her so.
Oh man,
Hey,
that was awesome. Fantastic.
Thank you very
Okay,
much.
all right.
Thank
So
Appreciate that.
we got some questions coming up. We'll let you do your thing, and then we'll just get back to everybody who want to know.
Yeah, for sure. So, because of sort of spending most of my career playing in standard tuning, and I worked for many years as a side person here in Canada in a bunch of different genres, and sort of having to be versatile as you are when you're a sideman. And when I started messing around with slide guitar and open tunings and stuff like that, I immediately became frustrated with the vocabulary that I lost. I was, really excited about the things that I got back from the open tuning, a lot of great sort of archetypal sort of slide guitar licks sort of live in open tuning, but a lot of the more adventurous chord voicings and scale patterns and stuff like that were kind of lost in that process. And so I started to kind of try to figure out ways to regain some of that vocabulary, or even supplement it with new things. Certain chord voicings, like a dominant 13 chord. I mean, there's many ways to play a 13 chord in this tuning, but the direct sort of replacement from standard tuning is like this, which is not exactly the funnest thing to play in the world. So I started looking for other options and other voicings, and you wind up getting some things that are not really typical sounds in standard tuning. Things like those kind of clusters and stuff like that. But so what I started to kind of do in the early days of the open tuning was, if any of my sort of current Skype students are watching, they're like, here he goes. But I started by asking certain questions, like what do I know and what don't I know. And at the beginning, there was very few things that I did know and many things that I didn't know. And the one thing that I did know is that if I bar my finger anywhere on the fretboard, I get a major chord. So that kind of gave me the first key to unlocking the fretboard, because I started saying, well, if this is my root, my third, and my fifth, then I should actually, in theory, be able to sort of logic my way through scale patterns and other chord voicings just by sort of honing in on this root position major triad. How's the level of the guitar there, Jeff? Is that okay? I don't know why I'm thinking about this now. Okay, good. So if this is 1, then a full step above 1 must be 2 from the major scale, and then if this is 3 in the middle here, then 4 must be a half step above there, because that's where your half steps between 3 and 4 and 7 and 1 in the major scale. 5, and then a full step up to 6, and then what wound up being really useful, and it may seem painfully obvious, but it wasn't to me, is that going back down the scale, things are closer. So, instead of going 5, 6, 7, there's my 7 in the major scale, I thought, well, if this is 1, half step below 1 is 7. So it was all a kind of very fundamental sort of problem solving, but it kind of changed the way that I look at the guitar. And I was, and still am, I mean, I won't pretend that I'm not, but I was very, very pattern sort of oriented and shape oriented before I started messing with the open tuning. But because when I changed the tuning over, obviously none of the shapes or the patterns worked anymore. So I had to kind of get creative, and it kind of forced me to think much more musically and be much more present in sort of what I'm thinking about and what I'm playing. And so again, that sort of using that sort of deductive logic to figure out where your major scale is surrounding that major triad may seem very fundamental and very rudimentary, but it wound up being probably the most powerful thing that I kind of stumbled on. And then from there, I started messing around with other scales, like, well, if this is a major scale. Oh, and I should also mention the other thing that I worked on was, okay, well, if these are all the notes that are in front of the triad, so going this way on the other side of the triad, then there must be notes behind the triad. So I just started to slowly unlock those patterns and those positions, sort of, and it always was based around the triad or the inversion. And that's sort of the next step, is to work up to your next inversion. So this is first inversion, and then I would do the same thing. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. So it was, no matter what I was doing, and even if it's like a melodic minor scale, it was still kind of based around where that major triad was initially. I used that major triad to also help unlock a minor pentatonic scale. 1, flat 3, 4, and always thinking about, well, if this is my triad, 1, 3, 5, then flat 3 must be here, 4 must be here, 5 is here, flat 7, so forth. And the other thing in this tuning is, because the bottom 3 strings are basically like a drop D kind of, it kind of makes scale patterns pretty ugly. So like trying to stay in one position looks like this. There's this big, huge leap. So it became kind of abundantly clear to me that taking that step of mapping out my scales in the way that I did in standard tuning, like nice sort of clean boxes and sort of positions, it wasn't really going to work. So I had to kind of get creative because I wanted to be able to play those things. I didn't want to go, well, if I'm going to play in open tuning, then I'm just, I'm limited to just doing, I wanted to be able to do everything. So that was kind of a big part of that for me. And then where that ended up going was focusing in on not just the sort of how the scale wraps around the 1 chord, but also interacting with how the scale wraps around the 4 chord and the 5 chord, because those were chords that I found myself needing a lot. Obviously, those are massive, whether you're playing blues or pop or country or whatever, the 1-4-5 is prevalent in everything. Gospel music, it's everywhere. And I have a bit of a theory that you can boil most things down to a 1-4-5 or even just 1 and 5. So I started mapping those out, and I started trying to see what it was like to kind of try to wrap the scale around those chords as well. So, and I guess there's an argument for that being almost a modal kind of approach, like if I'm looking at the 4 chord, but I'm in the key of F right now. So this is B flat, and playing F major around the B flat. So it's kind of, Lydian-esque, and then of course if you do the same thing around the 5 chord, you get Mixolydian. But what I wound up kind of thinking was the thinking about those modally was a little less helpful in this new tuning, in this sort of new environment, if you will. But it was actually more helpful to think about the individual chords by their scale step. So if this is root 3rd and 5th, then my 4 chord is root 4, 6, and my 5 chord is 2, 5, 7. That also gave me a lot of information for helping me navigate voice leading. And it's really no different than recognizing that, your 1 chord in the key of F is F, A, C, B flat, D, F, and C, E, G. But again, because I didn't know the individual notes in this tuning intimately. Obviously, I knew them a little bit, but I didn't know them super intimately. So going to the number system wound up being extremely helpful. And that's kind of where my brain lives now, in the number system. So, if I'm looking at my 1 chord, I'm thinking, if this is 1, 3, and 5, then my nearest 5 chord is 7, 2, 5. The next inversion up is 2, 5, 7. So thinking very specifically about the scale steps also was really helpful for trying to navigate the changes. Again, because, not to hammer home the point, but let's just pretend you only know where the 1 chord is. If you're really aware of the actual individual notes in the next chord that you're playing over, and for me, intervallically was really helpful. So the number system, then I could go, well, if this is my 5, this note here, then my 6, which is the 3rd of my 4 chord, is a whole step above. And again, that might seem kind of rudimentary, but it was really, really powerful for me unlocking this tuning. And then even when I went back to messing around with standard tuning, all of a sudden I started looking at the fretboard in a more, I kind of want to say more harmonic way, and was less inclined to play through scale positions and really try to get inside the chord changes that I'm trying to play over or whatever, or write with, or so I don't know if that's useful or helpful, but that's kind of a big part of my system. And then in terms of like actual things that I spent a lot of time working on was really mapping out the 1-4-5 chord and chord progression in any way that I could. And then, taking closed position triads or open voice triads. Oops, I played the wrong chord there. And really being deliberate about thinking about trying to exhaust whatever I could think of in terms of places to play it, play those chords, and yeah, that was pretty massive for me in terms of a system to kind of unlock the fretboard. And so no matter what now, whenever I look at the fretboard, I'm always thinking in terms of that chord progression, which, as we all know as guitar players, the 1-4-5 is really everything. It's everywhere. And even when you start to add in, when you're playing diatonically, you also have 3 minor triads available, the 2, 3, and 6 chord. And then you also have the diminished triad from the 7th position. And I started to think about maybe leaning on the relationship that a major chord has with its relative minor. So instead of going through, okay, now I know all my major chords, now I'm going to do my minor chords, I thought, well, what if I pretended that diatonically the 1 chord isn't the only chord that has a relative minor? What if the 4 chord also has a relative minor? So if we're in the key of F, the relative minor of F is D minor. If we're in the key of C, we have an F and we have a D minor. So the 4 chord and the 2 chord are kind of, in my mind, are relative. I mean, they are relative if you're in that respective key. And then the 5 chord and the 3 chord are also relative. So I started to experiment with things like substituting in the 3 chord instead of the 5 chord, or so that wasn't a great example, but when I'm working through that triad exercise, then swapping in the 5 for the 6, like the note 5, 1, 3, 5 for the note 6. So then all of a sudden this is C major, A minor, C major, A minor, C major, A minor, and then F major, D minor, F major, D minor, F major, D minor, G major, E minor, G major, E minor. So that kind of thing. So working on them as though they were not necessarily synonymous, but they are very closely related. So whenever I think 5 chord, I'm also thinking 3 minor. And whenever I think 4 chord, I'm also thinking 2 minor. And 1 chord 6 minor. Now, they're not always directly a great substitution. So you might find, hey, I tried that 3 minor thing over this 5 chord and it sounded terrible. So you also have to consider what's happening with the voice leading and also what's happening in terms of resolution. So in that sort of Amazing Grace example, that top note, the G, is directly in the melody, which is also the minor third of that 3 chord, or it's the root of the 5 chord. So there is a strong reason to go there if you want to. So I kind of feel like I'm rambling now, but that's kind of my whole system in sort of 7 minutes. It's very triadic. And I'm also an obsessive practicer, so I really like to give myself limitations to work in. So if I'm working on triads, I'm working on a specific group of strings. If I'm working, because I find what I often see in my Skype lessons is people go, well, I know this voicing here, and then I know it here, and then I know it here. And I ask, okay, well, what about in here? And they go, yeah, I haven't touched that yet. And I kind of feel like, well, that's exactly what we should be working on then, is the stuff that you're like, ooh, blah, I don't want to go there. And so by giving yourself limitations, like I'm only going to work on these 3 strings, you have nowhere to hide. You have to figure out where all the different positions of that are, and you could very much go, or, but there's also value in, and for me, it was mostly about, I just want to unlock as much of this as I can, as best as I can. And that was the system that really helped me. Because in the end, and not to hammer home this point, but in the end, the 1, 4, and 5 wound up being, when I got myself on the bandstand with an open tune guitar and found myself stuck, it was because I didn't know where those fundamental things were. And so that's when I started working on that, then all of a sudden music started coming out instead of just like, where the hell is that? I mean, there was plenty of that, and there still is plenty of that, to this day. I'll look down and go, oh yeah, you know what I mean? But I'm trying to limit as many of those oh God moments as I can.
Wow. Okay. Well, that was seriously, honestly, one of the best explanations of how to navigate an open tuning I've ever heard. Sure, man, because I've messed with them and kind of gone, I'm out, and following through thinking of it as scale tones and seeing it that way, or, the numbers, it's really great. So I have a bunch of questions. First of all, thanks to everybody who's people are tipping and all that. I appreciate that, and thank you very much. And thanks to Phil for moderating. You had said a number of things that resonated with me really well, and I talk to my students about the same stuff. It always comes down to the fundamentals. It always comes down to your triads, like all the time. So maybe some of my students are down here going, oh. And the exercise you gave them of going through the triad inversions is exactly what I give them up and down each string set, and just play on 3 strings at a time. Nothing else exists. Yeah.
Yeah, great.
And by creating, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, by creating a constraint, putting a constraint on what you're doing, you actually learn a lot more. And you're talking about that part of the area. I call it my students same thing, like, that's the mystery zone. I kind of know that. So if you kind of know it, then you don't know it. Yeah. That's it. Yep.
Yeah, for sure. That's a really, really great point. I meant to mention another thing. Another thing that you cannot overlook is forcing yourself to, if you're working on a scale, before you start trying to play all the different positions and all the different variations and getting into the modes of said scale, play it on one string first. Get to know. There is I think when you I'm bouncing all over the place. When you harmonize a major scale, I think you start to see, okay, there are certain zones of this scale that obviously from the 1 chord to the 2 chord, there are gigantic differences, or from the 1 chord to the 7 chord, there are massive differences. And so being able to really hone in on what those are, I think harmonically is really important. So when you play a scale on one string, it really forces you to kind of see, oh, this is what it looks like to go from 1, 2, 3 to 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, 5, 4, 5, 6, so on and so forth. You get, and for me, actually, it's kind of visual because it turns into a bit of a number line. You kind of see those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 kind of lay out in front of you. And then for me, the trick is having an intimate understanding of where those half steps are. So knowing that when you land on the 3rd, if you're improvising, then you've got a 4 a half step above, or the 7 a half step below the 1. Those are the things that become those little landmarks when you kind of find yourself getting lost. And so if you can go, okay, I don't know where I am on the fretboard, but I know that this here is the 1. So if this is the 1, then this must be, flat 7, or this must be the 2, or whatever. But as long as you kind of have those little landmarks, then you can kind of problem solve your way through the scale. And I think it's a bit of certainly would be a great thing to work on in addition to memorizing a scale position. But I also think it's maybe just a better way to look at it is just be really present when you're playing through a scale and going, where am I? What note am I on? Maybe it's helpful for you to say the letter name. Maybe it's helpful for you to say the interval. But making sure that if you're ripping through a scale or a lick, if you stop halfway through and you don't know what note you've landed on, then you kind of have a problem. And I don't mean, you need to be able to intellectually, because I know a lot of great players who are purely play by ear, and they would land on a note. Oops, sorry. They would land on a particular note, and they might not be able to say, okay, that's A flat, or that's the minor 3rd of this chord, but they associate some sort of method for naming it, and that's really important, is to be able to identify things, whether you're doing it intellectually or you're just doing it by ear, And a good example of that is the first time that I learned this chord was obviously my dad was teaching me a Jimi Hendrix tune because that was one of Jimmy's chords. And the first time I heard that chord on the radio, like it was like, I can't even remember the tune, but I was like, oh, I recognize that. That's the Jimi Hendrix chord. And that was the beginning of ear training for me, was the second that you recognize something outside of, anyway,
No.
I am definitely
it's all fantastic. And I love the idea of looking. When I see it as you play up and down one string, and you see the guitar as like a piano, because the guitar is very difficult to understand when you're looking at it this way. But when you see one line at a time, you're like, oh, there's a half steps, there's a whole steps, there's a scale intervals. Now I want to ask you a few questions.
Yeah.
Do you have a musical training background, and like what's your history? You said your father. So is your father a musician, or?
Yeah, my dad was a working musician when I was growing up. My brother and I were growing up, and he's mostly self-taught. I'm mostly self-taught, but I've definitely studied with people over the years and taken lessons and stuff like that. I'm a really big nerd. So I would take a lesson with somebody, and I would learn a bunch of things, and I'd go, okay, how can I take this to the next step? And I'd either be learning records or transcribing things and trying to, oftentimes I didn't have the tools to tackle the things I was working on. And so I had to develop my own system for understanding what was going on. And you start to make little connections. So I was constantly working on things and then going and updating my knowledge, based on that. But Winnipeg is, it's an underrated Canadian city, and it's a bit of an island. It's in the middle of the country, and there's literally no other major cities for thousands of kilometers or miles, whatever makes sense to your brain. And so as a result, it kind of had to develop its own music scene, because there wasn't like, you can't just, pop over to Toronto for a show because it's a 24-hour drive away, things like that. Vancouver's 26 hours away. So it just kind of made its own thing. And also because of that, no bands ever really came touring through town unless you were playing the arena. So there wasn't an opportunity to see people like Mike Landau or Robin, or it wasn't really like that. So the city just made its own music scene. So there's lots of people to study with and ask questions of and go see play. So
it's interesting. It just made me think of, I have a student in Darwin, Australia, and we had a lesson, and he's like, "What are you doing after this?" I'm like, "Well, Landau and Wayne Krantz and Jimmy Herring are playing around the corner, but I don't know. I'm kind of tired." He's like, "Wait, what? You're living in New York City."
You're considering not going to that?
You live in New York, and you like, yeah. So what the point was that kind of funny thing of that things. I've been fortunate enough to be around New York that you get to see these things. You sort of take it for granted. So that's I hadn't thought about that. That's really cool. So now one thing you said that I've never heard anybody else say it, and I think I try to reduce everything to a 1-4-5 as well. Which is when you mentioned that that's something you try to do. And can you talk about that a little bit more? So I talk about that a fair amount too, because that makes life so much easier, because everything can be a related minor chord, as you were sort of. So.
Yeah, sure. Well, and then from the 1-4-5, you can obviously modify things and substitute things. You've got lots and lots and lots of different substitution methods, but it all does kind of come back to that 1-4-5. And an interesting thing. Even if you look at bebop, which I'm not a great bop player, but I'm a great lover of it. And you listen to the way people are navigating the changes, and even though there's a lot of tritone substitution, there's a lot of sort of like diminished sidestepping. It is really coming back. A lot of it is coming back to the relationship between the 5 chord and the 1 chord. And to me, even before you throw the 4 chord in there, the 5 chord is kind of like you could play just about any song with just the 1 chord and the 5 chord, like. Oops. I'm screwing it up. Anyway, so I realized that I actually can't avoid the 4 chord in that song, so I proved myself wrong. But anyways, forget all that stuff I said about the 5 chord. Screw that. You need the 4 chord.
He looks at everything as a 5 chord. Right, so that makes sense.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And where does it want to go next? And I mean that makes sense in terms of standards as well, because that's the relationship that's happening between a 2-5-1. The 2 is the 5 of 5. The 5 is the 5 of 1. 7 half diminished to the 3 to the 6 to the 2 to the 5. Those are all that cycle of fourth and fifth kind of information. But I definitely, if I'm trying to break something down, like that second tune that I played, the Ray Charles tune, Hallelujah, I Love Her So, lots of substitutions and lots of fun stuff, but you could absolutely play it. Let me tell you about a girl I know. She's my baby and she lives next door. Every morning before the sun comes up, she brings my coffee in my favorite cup. And it's square, but it works. And that is kind of the fundamental of most of these songs is those relationships. And I think there's kind of two ways to looking at, there's a million ways of looking at it, but I think about it in terms of perfect cadence and plagal cadence. So 1 to 5 or 1 to 4. And the relationship between the 1 to the 4 chord to me is the 1 chord resolves to the 4 chord the same way that the 5 chord resolves to the 1 chord. So there's this cycle of resolution. And then anything that you're doing beyond that is just trying to increase the tension so that the resolve is stronger, my favorite thing to do with a 5 chord before it goes back to the 1 is I want to see how far away I can get from that fundamental 5 chord. So something like this is G7. So you could play C sharp 7 over G. And I'm not entirely thinking about that as extensions or alterations. I'm just thinking about it as how far away can I get from that G chord. The other one that works really great is moving that whole chord shape up a half step. So this is not a classic dominant chord because it's got a major 7 in it and a natural 4 and a flat 9. So if you were to name that, it would be G11 major 7 with a flat 9. So that's not really a traditional chord, but it still does resolve back to that 1. So those are things that you can check out.
Please. And a lot of it comes down to experimentation. It doesn't matter what the name of it is, right? When you get the sound in your head and you just say, well, I moved it up a half step, and suddenly you're like, oh, that works. And the more you experiment with the stuff, the more your ear accepts these things as something that works great. So it's a lot of it. It comes down, I think, to your saying you're an obsessive practicer, and the more time you spend on the instrument, and I'm sure you spend a lot of time exploring, right? Like let's see what happens here.
Absolutely.
And I'm just going to move that up a half step, and wow, that really works. It's functioning as some sort of extended dominant, or 5 of 5 or something like that. Some sort of, I forget the terminology for that, but at the end of the game, it doesn't matter. It still comes down to you hearing that tritone moving in a certain way and adding more tension.
Yeah.
And I look at it as, even if you're playing single notes, you have your chord tones and your fundamentals, and then you're adding in chromaticism to just delay the resolution. So that's kind of what you're doing, It is what you're doing.
100%. That is 100% what's happening. Yeah, for sure. And another thing that I'm glad you brought that up, but another thing that I think about is making chord tones my absolute priority, and then supplementing them with scale tones. And so if you're looking at something like that G sharp madness over G, then I would be, if I was playing over that, I would be looking at really trying to map out that G sharp 7 first. Or actually, I'm resolving to the wrong place. So I'm really just I'm being very literal about the changes. 1 7 5 3 1 natural 7 flat 7 chromaticism, and then a half step up to the 5 of the 1 chord.
Right, but it's once again talk about the fundamentals, and it's just sometimes Robin and I have talked about this, and we've done the workshops. Like, just play the chord, play the notes in the chord, and that will play the chord, then play
Yeah.
the notes in the chord, and that's often one of the coolest things that you can play. It doesn't have to be super, I don't want to say super hip. The information is already there, and then your ear will pull you to that chromatic resolution. So once again, it's the fundamentals. You're just playing the arpeggio of the chord and dig it in.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a smartass with my students, and I'm sure you get this question too. They go, "Hey, I got this new chord. I've been trying to figure out what's the scale that goes over it." And my question is always, "What are the notes in the scale, or what are the notes in the chord?" Let's start with that first. If you don't know the notes in the chord, the notes in the scale aren't going to help, because just playing notes from a scale over top of a chord is like a run-on sentence. Every now and then you're going to hit a chord tone. It's just inevitable because it's in there, but you're not actually getting to the point. If you're playing over like the old Lydian dominant chord. So you could play Lydian dominant all day long, but to me, I really want to make sure I know where.
That's the root of the sound. Yeah, absolutely.
I want to know where all those chord tones are. First.
The scale is just
absolutely. And if you totally, yeah. And the scale is also it's relative, right? Because I could play B flat Lydian on a B flat chord, and that only makes sense if it's the 4 chord, or if you're playing something rooted in Lydian. If I play C Lydian over C as a 5 chord, that doesn't work. So the context of the scale is also really important as well, and that to me always comes back to the origin of the chord, where Lydian works over a 4 chord because that's what happens when you play the major scale starting on the 4, and that's it's conditioned.
But then if you're thinking about it as Lydian and you play Lydian, it kind of goes out the window as opposed to thinking about the chord itself, where you're just seeing the minimum amount of work you need to change between those sounds, and it could just be one note that actually nails that change, as opposed to thinking scales.
Yeah, totally. I find it way more effective to try and work in, like if I'm playing over B flat and I want it to sound Lydian, I just work in an E natural. I'm not really interested in playing. That to me, it takes forever for it to actually sound
to
like
get to
Lydian
that sharp
scale.
4. Yeah, of course.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, just get to the point.
Yeah, exactly. And same thing with like a Dorian. Yeah, with the Dorian mode, there's nothing more Dorian sounding than a flat 3 and a natural 6.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to mess around with ba ba dee ba da ba dee ba da ba dee ba da ba dee ba dee ba dee ba dee ba dee ba dee ba dee. Nah. And then there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not poo-pooing it, but it's just that's not my.
I mean, yeah. No.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for being brave to make the generalization.
Our favorite players. I want to get to your influences, but my favorite players don't do that. Like it's just, to be honest, it's immature playing in my mind. Like, and I'm guilty of sometimes just shredding and doing that kind of stuff. But to me, you don't hear, if we talk about Pat Metheny, he's not doing that. And if you're talking about even like Haldsworth, they weren't doing that. It was the overall sonority of the sound, and they were outlining changes. As crazy as Haldsworth was, he was making those changes because he knew what the chords were. And that's
well, and if you hear when you hear Holdsworth talking about what he's playing, he plays scales and says, "This is blah 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 chord to me." He's not and I mean he's got his own systems. Like he sort of invented a lot of things for his own playing, but it's very harmonically derived. And I think that all of my favorite players and my favorite kind of playing come from that place. Absolutely.
I'd say it. Well, and I think I think it's being 2 years older than you. In the 80s, I think I've talked a lot about this with my students, and Jason Laughlin, who's a True Fire instructor, great guitar player, and if you know Jason, we have this conversation where at some point when musical education went into colleges, I feel like they had to quantify everything as a scale. And I remember at Berkeley, they were saying, like I can say on Autumn Leaves or something, you have a 2-5-1, they're saying, well, that's Dorian to mixed Lydian to Ionian. And then it's just the same key. And how about I just hit the chord tones? It's really just making sure I outline those changes. So I think there was just a way of teaching that people were like, well, these are the scales that go along. And somewhere along the line, I feel like on an educational angle, that got lost. of the idea of melody, and everything is based upon the harmony, and all the other notes really don't matter. It depends on what you want to do with them, you know? So I could talk about this forever. I've got so many questions, and this has been awesome. So at what point did you decide, you might have said at the beginning I was doing some technical stuff, but for me, did you decide to just commit to open C tuning? Did you just love the sound? Does it match your voice? Or like, what were the considerations that you said, okay, I'm just doing this?
Yeah. Before Open C, there was Open E for me. So the first record that I made with my brother, I mean, I'll try and make this story brief, but I got a phone call in 2005 or 2006. No, actually, I'm lying. 2007, I think it was. Doesn't matter. And somebody said, hey, somebody said that you're a slide guitar player and that you play dobro, and I manage this band, and they've been chosen to go on tour, first band of 3 opening for Toby Keith. So it's like a cross Western Canada arena tour, and I'd never done anything like that. And I, of course, at that point did not play dobro, but I said, yeah, I play dobro. And so I went to Long McQuaid, which is Canada's guitar center, and I said, what's the best sounding resonator you got? I'm going on tour like next week. And so I bought this $300 dobro brand resonator made by Gibson, which is made of plywood that's about that thick. And then put a $1,000 pickup system in it. It's like worth way more than the guitar. But that started my sort of journey with Open E. And so I played in that tuning on that tour, got really familiar with it, and then started writing songs in it. And by the time our record had come out, I had, within the 6 months after the album was released, I had quit all my sideman gigs. Which was the only reason that I was still playing in standard, because I was playing a lot of sort of pop country stuff, and it didn't really make a ton of sense to play it in open tuning at that point in time. So I once I let go of those gigs, then all the songs that I had written and we were playing on the road were all in open tuning. So it was just kind of like, it just kind of flopped there. And then when we came off the road and then I was doing a little more gigging around town, I found myself a little more comfortable creatively in Open E. And I've told this story before, but I was playing in a dance band, just like sort of funk and pop covers and stuff like that. I was the dancer, yeah. Like bikini and bikini top and Daisy Dukes on the bottom, cowboy boots. So it was, band leader would call tunes like Thriller, and I'd be looking at my fretboard going like, oh my God, those chord stabs at the end. What the hell are they? And I would, as we were playing the song, I would be going, okay, A flat sus to B sus? What the hell was it? And I just had to think on the fly. And that was a really, really tremendous education. But so once I accidentally was able to play through Thriller, then I was like, okay, I think I'm in this now. So that was probably around age, I don't know, 20, 25, 26, when I just was like, this is my thing.
Yeah, and sorry, I'm just looking at my questions. You caught me off guard there. It's
all good.
What are some of your who are some of your influences, or what are some of your influences? I don't want to say what I hear. I think when you play slide, there's the big names that always come up, and what I think is so great about your playing is you're the only guy I really know who mixes all the deeper harmony with an open tuning and slide. And I'm not, I'm a big fan of all the other well-known name slide players, but you have that understanding, which is really refreshing. I don't mean that in any kind of way stabbing anybody else with, of what your knowledge of music and your knowledge of harmony. So when you write tunes, I'm almost like, oh God, yeah, there's those extensions. And I love it because there's a jazz element to it. So who were some of your influences? And then, you certainly have your own voice, but I'd like to hear you that.
Yeah. Well, slide influences, my first sort of slide hero was Sonny Landreth. We're not related. Well, actually, we've discovered that we are. The Landreth family pool is not that deep. So we are distant cousins. I've never met him though, mind you. My dad knows him, and he
I
played on
know
my
him
dad's
well,
record,
and he's the
actually, in
nicest guy in
but-
the world. And he speaks very highly of
Oh,
you.
no kidding. Well,
Seriously, no.
Ah,
I
shut up.
mentioned you, and
Really?
he's like, man, that guy is really good. So yeah.
oh man. Well, that is way too cool because he was my first hero, and I started. I got a slide for Christmas one year. I asked my folks for a slide, and started trying to lift those kind of licks. So that's kind of where I got some of those sounds was from him, and then slide didn't take for me until I was a little bit older, and the thing that really kind of pushed me over was hearing Derek Trucks do that Sacred Steel kind of stuff, like the and when I heard him doing that, was like, oh man, I need to learn how to do that. And then I got hip to the Campbell brothers and Aubrey Gent and his son Aubrey Jr. These real deal Sacred Steel guys, Robert Randolph. That kind of like vocal emulation really got me. And again, like I've always been interested in I don't know what the word is, extended vocabulary. I'm a really big chord nerd. I love scales. Like, I just love music, everything about music. So it was always like, I don't want to be limited. I mean, no matter what, the slide is limiting. So, but I just wanted to be as little limited as possible. Is that even good English? I don't know. So it was like going through things and transcribing tough stuff, trying to play bop lines, or just trying to play things outside of.
To relearn the instrument from standard tuning.
Yeah. I mean,
no, just
sorry.
For me, like, I play. There's my national over there. I play some, but it's just kind of a passing hobby. And then, for me, when I go into open tunings, I'm thinking, all right, I'm lost because I'd have to relearn the instrument. So yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah. It definitely hits it wasn't an entire, obviously I didn't have to relearn the physicality of it. I knew how to hold it, and I knew how to push down on the strings. That is the tough stuff. But yeah, for sure. It is kind of a like hit the reset button and like, good luck. See you on the other side. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the Vaughn brothers were massive influences. Jimmy and Stevie Ray, of course, and like when the first time I heard Texas Flood, um, I I think I lived inside that record for 2 years. It was like the only thing that I would listen to. And again, I was pretty obsessive, so it was like I couldn't get enough of it. And then every Stevie Ray record I could find, all the greatest hits. I had everything I could get my hands on. And then I fell in love with Robin's playing. So I'm a massive Robin Ford fan. Same thing. Ordered all the DVDs. Ordered all the records. And then Landau was my favorite guy after that. I don't know. Yeah. So then things started to diversify a little bit, and I started to listen to a little more of other folks. So I got really into Miles Davis and Sonny Rollins and Charlie Parker and Bud Powell and players kind of like that of that era. Ahmed Jamal, I can't remember his first name, but a brilliant piano player. Yeah. And most recently I've been really into Bach. So like all the great old chorales and what the hell is it? That kind of stuff. I really love that stuff too. So I listen to it. I don't play very much of that because it's very friggin' hard, but I listen a lot to that kind of stuff. Yeah, but those are really the main ones. And Ry Cooder, Bonnie Raitt.
Yeah, sure. But it's cool.
as
I
well.
love hearing that
Yeah.
we have a lot of the same influences of Robin and Landau and Stevie Ray and all this. But I don't. It's amazing that you kind of built it into your own style, which is really refreshing to hear. So I've got plenty of questions coming in.
Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do it.
People want to know about your songwriting, your process, and if you could just talk about songwriting in general.
Yeah. Cool. I don't see myself as a prolific writer at all, and writing is probably the thing that I struggle the most with, and it's maybe the most rewarding of the sort of pursuits, but it is definitely not something that comes easy to me. So there's usually a lot of hair being pulled out while I'm writing, but I usually start with a musical idea, chord progression, or a riff. Mostly it's chord progressions. I mean, you've heard me talk already a lot about harmony and stuff like that. So I'm usually starting with just the skeleton of the song. So getting the chord progression down and making sure that, I'm inspired by the harmony that's underneath it. And then I try to build a melody over top of that. And, sometimes all that stuff happens at the same time. And sometimes it's just harmony and I'm just building sections. And in the back of my mind, I have a few melodic ideas, and I kind of try to get the main outline of most of the sections kind of down first. But that also changes. It totally depends. Like, because of the quarantine and social distancing, staying home a lot, I've been writing a couple of tunes and demoing at the same time. So I write a section, I record it, program. Drag and drop the drum beat in,
yes.
Pick snare hats sort of individually, and I'm trying to build a track as you go. And part of it's not, that's not I don't think that's a common writing tool in my genre necessarily, but it's what I have available. I don't have a ton of money to pay drummers to play on stuff, so I'm just coming up with stuff, and it's really, really rewarding and challenging, and it's outside of my comfort zone for sure. But it's been really fun. So recently, I've been building tunes as they go and kind of writing lyrics as the song kind of progresses, which is actually kind of a fun way to do it. Because as I come up with creative ideas and sounds, then that inspires different melodies and different lyrics and stuff like that. So I've been really kind of shaking things up in the writing department lately. But I think the main point for me is just chase the inspiration. So if you find something that you're really inspired by, try to finish it. Don't be precious. If you have one great lyric, for me it's lyrics that I always get hung up on, and the thing that I always come back to is, this line is really great and I can't find anything that's good enough to match it. So what? Put the shitty line down and move on,
right,
and go back and fix it. So editing is really big, and at least for me. So getting a rough outline of the story, and then also, with that said, having a good idea of what your story is. Like, is it a story about you? Is it about someone else? Is it fictional? Is it personal? Is it anecdotal? Whatever it is, do you have a vision for the story? Where is it going? And a lot of times, new writers, and I'm still very much a new writer myself, so this is criticism on my own stuff as well, but we get a feeling that we want to write about, and we can't get beyond the feeling. So the whole song is, I feel this, I feel this, I feel this, I feel this, and there's not much beyond that. So I like to challenge myself to, okay, this is what I'm feeling, if it's heartbreak or happiness or whatever, this is what I'm feeling. Now, what does that look like? What does that sound like? Maybe it smells like something, like, the smell of fresh rain on a blah, blah, I don't know. But trying to get outside of just the feeling. How can you expand and share with your listener more about the environment that you're living in? And everything winds up kind of coming back to the emotional in some way. I mean, I think that's, we emotionally consume music for sure. But the more sort of detail you can give, and sometimes lack of detail is strategic. You don't necessarily want something to be abundantly clear. You want to write something that makes people go,
right.
Wait, what do you
mean? Too
by
literal,
that?
Right? Yeah.
And sometimes that's, yeah. But I think whatever you're going to do, whether you're going to be overly literal or not, or you're going to be vague, just having a goal in mind and making sure that you're working that in terms of your storytelling is important.
I mostly write instrumental music, but I'm a huge fan of great songwriters and great lyricists. Who are some of your favorites? Who do you feel like you kind of are looking for inspiration? I mean, I'll tell you mine. I'd love to hear yours first.
Yeah. Oh man. Joni Mitchell, James Taylor. God, there's so many. I mean, the classics definitely. Lennon McCartney. But also Dylan, yeah. But also Lowell George. Love Lowell's writing. His writing is so vivid, and the music follows the story. That's when you listen to a Little Feat song, or the first time you learn something like Dixie Chicken, and you realize that none of the sections are the same ever, you know, or something like Long Distance Love, where every verse is a completely different chord progression, you know, like there's and I kind of, the way I interpret that is as Lowell saying like, well, this verse is saying something different. The music needs to something different. Yeah. So I really love that. And I definitely lately have been trying to channel that kind of mentality, like making sure that the music is reflecting the story. But I'm blanking. There are so many other writers that I love, but I don't get to talk about that very often.
Those are great answers. And I definitely want to put you on the spot. You're like, I don't know. Who you like? Go ahead.
Oh, Donovan Woods, who's a fellow Canadian and a friend of mine, but he's one of my favorite writers. Rose Cousins is another Canadian songwriter from the East Coast who just will smash your heart to little pieces with her songs and her voice. And I really admire her writing.
Rose Cousins.
Rose Cousins.
Check them out.
Yeah. And actually, my brother. My brother is one of my favorite
writers. The new
writers.
record is great. The past two records have been really spectacular with you guys. Yeah.
Thank you. And we co-write everything, and he challenges me a lot to get out of my comfort zones when we write, and he brings some of the most sort of vivid the more vivid sort of writing of ours is usually my brother's.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Sort of thing. Yeah, I'm kind of a dummy where it's just like, my heart hurts because she heard it, you know. And my brother's like, let's find a better way to say that.
Very cool.
Yeah. Let's write this like we actually know how to read.
All right, so we got a few. All right, let's just talk about some stuff that you also give lessons. I just want to promote that as well. So on Skype, and they can contact you. The link is in the bio, or is in the comment notes, or it's in the detail section here. And I think Phil, if you can post that right there, we'll get in touch with you for lessons, which would be spectacular. I'll like to take one with you as well, because my slide playing is I just love the way you laid it all out. It was a perfect sense. It was fantastic. I think Eli is on. Two Rock chimed in. I'm assuming that's our buddy Eli. Yeah, I'm assuming that's Eli.
Eli.
Eli Lester, greatest man in the business. So let's just talk about gear for a little bit, because people want to know, what are you playing through? Can you just kind of run through your general thing, the guitar, the pickups, the amps, blah blah blah.
Yeah, this is my number one. This is built by a guy in Edmonton, Alberta, by the name of Alex Sorokin. It's modeled after a 54 that I couldn't afford, and so I commissioned him. Actually, I did not commission him, because he does not take orders. He is he builds for the joy of it, and he builds whatever he wants. But I contacted him at a time when he was like, I think I'd like to build an all gold top. And then somebody had given them my record, so it was a perfect storm that I got this guitar. So this is my number one. It's got throwback pickups in it. I can't remember the model. But I'm a fan of them. And then I'm playing into Two Rock Bloomfield, my Bloomfield, and then in front of that is the Victoria Reverberama, which sounds like that.
Sure does.
Got that harmonic trim.
Sounds awesome.
It sure does. Yeah, and that's oh man, it is. I didn't step on it today, but I got the Cornerstone Gladio or Overdrive.
Cool.
Sounds really, really great. And then again, I have it just in case, but I'm actually using the Chase Bliss Blooper as a delay pedal.
All running into the front of the amp, right?
So, yeah, all running into the front of the amp, and then the amp is going into a Boss tube amp expander.
And you have your own pedal amp.
For the cabinet.
What is? Please tell
me. I do, and I don't. Yes, it's frustrating. I'm assuming it's because of coronavirus, but I don't have my own pedal right now. It's on its way. Right. It's been on its way for like 3 weeks. I think it's stuck at the border. But it's I'm a really big Blues Breaker overdrive pedal fan, and I've got a bunch of different versions of that pedal. And Jackson Audio made this overdrive pedal last year before, called the Broken Arrow, which is like a tube screamer with all the bells and whistles, MIDI, and a clean boost with a bunch of different EQ functions. And I really loved the platform. It's a little tiny pedal, and you can, by stepping on both stomps, you can cycle through a couple different levels of gain. So wherever you have the gain knob, it'll knock it back to 25%, 50%, 75%, or 100% of where the gain knob is set.
That's really cool.
I loved that function, but I've never been a big tube screamer guy. And although the Broken Arrow sounds fantastic, it's just not the tube screamer circuit is just not my Jones. And so it was on my board for a long time. I just had this idea. I thought he would probably be able to put a Blues Breaker in there, and I would love that pedal. So I just called him and said, "Hey, would you ever be able to do this?" And he said, "Yeah, sure." So like flavors of King of Tone, the Timmy pedal is also another sort of Blues Breaker-esque thing. Dan Ray, I think, is kind of flavors of Blues Breaker. So it's like maybe we can get something that's kind of has a few different kind of options like that. And that's what we built. And so that's called the Jackson Audio Golden Boy, which is not named after the Seinfeld skit about the yellow T-shirt. It is named after a statue that sits on top of our legislative building here. So the arm of the Canadian government that's in the province of Manitoba. So there's the Golden Boy sits atop the legislature building, and it's kind of a landmark for Winnipeg, and it's a pretty gorgeous looking thing. So I wanted to pay homage to my hometown. So that's what I did. My goal is I actually am not a musician. I work for Tourism Manitoba, and I'm just trying to get people to come to Winnipeg.
They should definitely do. I've never been. It's crazy living here. I've never been to Canada. I've been all around Europe.
Way.
I've been to Hong Kong and South America, and it's crazy.
But you've never been to Toronto. You've never been to Montreal.
Rochester, New York. I've never. I don't know what it is. I mean, it's the craziest thing.
God.
I've been, south, and I've been to all throughout Europe and Asia. Yeah, I don't know. I just
right.
It's not that I don't want to.
I mean, I'm not at all surprised that you haven't been to Winnipeg. It's not, like I said earlier, it's not a common stop for people who are touring unless you're. But Toronto's 7 hours away.
I know.
You can take the bus there. Toronto's a really great city. I lived there for 3 years with my wife while she was going to school, and it's one of my favorite cities. Yeah. Montreal is fantastic. Winnipeg. I kind of think of it as it's like the St. Louis or the Pittsburgh. It's very blue collar. It's like it's a major city, but it's I don't know. And ironically, well, not ironic, but I love St. Louis. I love Pittsburgh. Anytime we've toured through there, it's like, I feel like I'm at home.
Pittsburgh's kind of getting a tech revival right now, which is interesting. Yeah, which is kind of cool. So I've got some questions of my own, and I'll get to. Do you have to run or anything? We've got a lot of people online, a bunch of questions. Okay, cool, man. Thanks for doing this. Once again, they can get your pedal through your website.
The pedal is right now. The first 500 are available through Reverb.com. So I think I sent.
You did.
I believe
I
sent you the
making sure that everybody understands where they can get it and hear it from you. Okay.
Yeah. So the first 500 are available there, and then anything beyond that will be available from Jackson. Jackson.audio is their website.
All right. So we're both Two Rock guys.
Yeah.
And so, do you want to talk about how your relationship with Two Rock? Just because people always ask, and I have a Bloomfield Drive as well, and I love it, and just how you met. Just curious because everyone always asks, and so I thought it was a great time for both of us to talk about the great company too.
Absolutely. Well, I obviously the first time, well, not obviously, but the first time I heard of Two Rock was John Mayer playing
I'm sorry,
his
who?
Two Rock all those years
Just
ago,
kidding.
and just some guy. Uh, and a friend of mine in town bought one in like 2004, 2005, and everybody came out to the first gig he had. All the guitar players in town were like, "Oh, cool, Two Rock." And then fast forward, probably 10 years later, I was playing on a record in LA, and I posted somewhere, hey, I'm in town, and Josh Smith sent me a message. Hey, man, like you're playing. If you're in LA, come and hang out. So after the session one day, I hopped in my rental car and drove over to Josh's place, and he had a TS1 that was modded to have reverb, and I plugged into it and was like, this is the sound. And obviously, like being such a massive Robin Ford fan, like that sort of lead, that rich harmonic lead sound was like, this is it. Like this is the sound. Yeah. So at that point, I played through that amp and was just overcome with infatuation, and called Eli the next day, or sent him a message and just said, hey, I played Josh's TS1, and I'm just wondering if that's something that I could order. And Eli had said, yeah, we could do something like that, but like, maybe you want something like that's a little different.
Who
like
says
let
that?
me know. Like let's talk about this, because I could.
Except him. Yeah. I know.
Only Eli. And I said, well, honestly, that amp that Josh had was perfect. And he was like, yeah, but that's Josh's amp. Like what does Joey's amp look like? And I said, well, that overdrive channel with reverb would be unbelievable. And he said, well, we're coming out with this new model, the Bloomfield, and I could make you a Bloomfield, and let's talk about things that you like, and I'll mod the Bloomfield to kind of some of your specs. And so we just talked back and forth for a couple weeks, and then he said, okay, I think I have an idea what I'm going to do, and until your amp is ready, you can borrow one of my TS1s. So he sent me one of his personal TS1s, which my cat scratched the speaker cabinet, which when I finally returned it to him, I was like, I don't know how to tell you this, man. I'm sorry. And he was unbelievably gracious about that.
A mutual friend who's in Two Rock as well, Corey Congilio, borrowed one because Eli sent him one, and it got wet on a gig outside, and everything, like the cover started to peel off, and Eli was like, whatever. He gave him crap about it for sure. Same thing here. We were talking about like refining mine.
Oh, yeah.
And then Corona's hit. So same kind of thing. Like, what do you like, and what do things that I want to dial in about the amp. So we could go on about them forever. I do want to get to everybody.
Yeah.
Sorry?
No, I was just going to add to that. Yeah. I cannot say enough nice things about those guys. They do great work. Yeah. They're passionate. Very much the same way that we're passionate about what we do, and it's pretty hard not to connect with somebody who loves what they do in the same way that you love what you do, whether it's the same thing or not. And Eli, and Mac, and I've just recently met Bill, but Eli and Mac have become very, very good friends. Beyond just work and guitar, and they're just when my brother's son was born. They sent a care package of baby stuff.
Mac and Eli. Yeah, I've heard of other.
Just people who care. Yeah, so it's special. It's a really special relationship, and I can't say enough things. I'm very, very fortunate and grateful to have the relationship.
That's what and on the road, Eli sent me his amp to use when I was doing on the West Coast, and. Yeah, don't worry about it. And so, okay, we can go on to how great they are, but I just want to give them a shout and say, if you, they are not inexpensive amplifiers, but they're worth once you play one, you're like, oh, okay. Everything else is like, all right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly what happened when I played Josh.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, oh, no.
Same thing. Eli was cool.
What can I sell?
Just check it out. Send you want to check it out. And I'm like, okay. And I played it. I'm like, okay, what do we have to do here? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh no.
Okay, let me try to get some people's questions because I'm just blabbing, enjoying all this. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry, I'll try to keep my answers a little shorter.
People are digging it, so I got to run through these. So, Okay, this is a quick question. Do you do anything, some general stuff to protect your hearing? While you're playing in practice, like on gigs.
Oh, yeah. With the brothers Landreth, we are mostly on in-ears. So the hearing protection is kind of built into that, as long as you're careful about how loud your pack is, because I think you can wind up doing more damage with in-ears if you're not careful. The other thing is, I really don't play very loud. And that the Two Rock show that we played at NAMM was probably the loudest I've ever played in
Jason
my entire
Laughlin
life.
And I saw you at City Winery, and I was like, dude, you got to turn up, man. Because it was a low sounding volume room, but I was surprised. So you have the 100 watt, or is that a 40?
I do have the 100 watt, and I run it in 100 watt mode. I find that even in 50 watt, even though you get a little more, you do get a little less headroom. I kind of prefer the extra headroom. I certainly play louder than I ever have, but I think it's still pretty quiet. But when I first moved to Toronto, my very first gig that I played, I got off the first set and everybody in the band was like, "Man, you got to turn up." So I think it's also a bit of maybe a Winnipeg thing, or maybe it's just me, but my idea of loud and other people's idea of loud is not the same. But so I mean, rarely do I walk off the stage nowadays with ring in ears. So if I'm going and playing in a situation I know is going to be really loud, I just wear earplugs.
Thank you. All right. What kind of strings do you use? What gauge are you using on your guitar?
I use Stringjoy Strings, which is a company out of Nashville, and they're really cool because you can completely customize your string set. And because of the low tuning that I use really weird, well, not really weird, but an impossible to find commercially set. So this current set is 19, 22, 24, or maybe this is 21. Can't remember. 19, 22 or 21, 24. 32, 42, and 60 on the bottom. And that string set has gone through a number of different changes, but that's kind of where I've landed right now. So 19 on top and 60 on the bottom.
Yep.
Them.
Okay, so I'm looking for another. Again, a question. I'll look for other ones then. Everyone has a question. As Phil said, if you just put a question mark in front of it, as I go through it, I can see it. I'm cutting myself off screen, so I'm just going to be squinting at a screen. So, which is not one of my favorite things to do. So did you have a lot of stuff set up? People were asking about the touring. Did you have a lot of stuff set up that was unfortunately canceled because of Corona?
Yeah, we had quite a bit of things on the books. We were supposed to do a Western Canadian run end of March, beginning of April. We were supposed to have a bunch of dates in the U.S. In May. I was supposed to go to Europe for all of June. We had a big European tour in the fall with the brothers, and all that's gone away. I think if everything goes absolutely perfectly, the Western Canadian tour will be rescheduled for the fall time for November. But other than that, everything's gone away, and we're looking at hopefully rescheduling everything to the first quarter of 2021. So it's crazy, man. Like, this is the most time I've spent off the road in 15 years. Like, I haven't been home for 6 months.
Wow.
Ever, in my professional life. So this is. I mean, it's nice. I could really get used to this. Not living
Matt
out of a
Schofield
suitcase
was on.
thing,
He was saying the same thing. This is the longest time he's actually put his head on his own pillow. Since he started playing,
Yeah.
And how are you handling not playing out live? I mean, is it affecting you kind of on a? David Grissom was on a few weeks ago, and he was saying, we talk all the time. He's like, I'm just kind of losing it because I'm not playing, with people. Do you finding that kind of feeling? It's hard. Yeah. It's really hard.
I'm getting there. I'm definitely getting there. The first few weeks of it was like, wow, this is kind of nice. I'm spending way more time with my wife and practicing and getting all this stuff done. But now I'm starting to go like, man, it would be really, really nice to play some shows or just make music with my friends, and all the sort of online collaborations are really fun. But it's just not the same, and it's you're only playing for a minute at a time, and you're half recording, half taking video, so it's definitely challenging. but a little dose of perspective. If that's the only thing that I'm struggling with, then I'm in a pretty good position. I'm grateful nobody's sick, but yes. Man, it would be. Oh, it'd be
I
so
know
nice
you
to
get
play
so you're so passionate about it. Excuse me, to not have that feeling and the interaction with other people in that musical. Yeah, it's not great. No, it's not great at all. No.
It's not.
Okay, if you're on Death Row, what would be your last meal from TC? Yeah, what would
What's
be
that?
your
If I was on
for
Death
your
Row?
last meal? Why not? Let's try it.
Let's do it. Just a massive plate of Oreo
Really?
cookies.
Oh, okay,
Oreos
cool.
are my favorite.
What do you feel the difference between a Fender or Gibson scale lengths in terms of slide intonation? Do you feel any difference between the two?
That's a great question. I mean, I've been mostly playing this guitar for quite a while, so I don't really go back and forth between sort of Gibson scale length and Fender scale length very often. I can't say that I really notice a big difference. That I when I pick up a Fender scale guitar, that all of a sudden I'm struggling with the intonation. But maybe now that you mention it, I will notice it, and then I'll never be able to play another Strat.
Somebody just asked Tracy Farmer, who's working with the Dallas Guitar Show, are you interested in playing the Dallas Guitar Show, which is still on the books at this point? And okay, I'll get you guys. I'll connect you two. There you go.
Please do. Yeah.
All right. Do you have any tips on singing and playing? How do you go about singing and playing?
That's a great question. Subdivision is massive. So, and it may not be the first thing that comes to mind, but take the vocal line, subdivide the vocal line, and if you're musically literate or not, this is really helpful. And subdivide the guitar line. So if the vocal line is going 1 E and a 2 E and a 3, something like that, and the guitar is going 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, looking at where the guitar line and the vocal line line up, and then also looking at where they don't line up, and trying to create a bigger, like if you imagine a drummer playing, hats with one hand and snare with the other hand, imagine your voice being one hand and the guitar being the other hand, and trying to get them to kind of create a rhythm. So that is really helpful, and it's tough, but you do that one or two times, you really get inside a song a couple of times, and you'll find that your skills really improve. I learned this tune many years ago. The vocal line and the guitar line were so different, and the only way that I could figure out how to play them was to subdivide them and like analyze the sort of syncopation between the two parts. And once I did that, then it really worked. But another thing that you can kind of work on is playing the guitar line and literally just thinking the vocal line for a bit, and trying to get it so that you can successfully think through the lyrics and the melody in your head while playing the guitar line. And then once you feel comfortable with that, moving to speaking the lyrics in the rhythm. So don't worry about singing, just speak the lyrics in the rhythm while you're playing, and then build your way up to singing them. That has been really, really helpful for me. And I do that kind of exercise when I'm learning new songs, and I did it as recently as like a week and a half ago, learning a new tune and finding that I was playing on acoustic and the strumming pattern was just kind of throwing off the vocal. So I just slowed it down, just like you do with anything. Slow it down, get analytical if that's kind of your thing.
It's a really clear cut. This is how I do it, as opposed to some people I just play it a lot. It's really great when you can give something that works for you that clear cut. So thank you, because I don't sing much, but I've worked on playing and singing, and I find it to be quite a struggle. So I'll try that. Yeah.
It's super tough. It's super tough. Yeah.
Okay, some other questions. What's your favorite song that you have ever written, if there's such a thing?
Oh man. Man, I really like the title track for my last record, Hindsight. I'm pretty critical of my own music, and my wife can attest that anytime my music comes on, even if somebody's either playing a playlist or the very rare occasion where a song might come on the radio, I immediately shut it off or skip. But it just like man, like Biggie says, don't get high on your own supply. But if forced, I really like the song Hindsight.
Okay. What are your settings on, where's that question then, the Broken Arrow pedal, if you could talk about that. I just preferred on Broken Arrow, what were your preferred settings? I think they said you talked about it a little bit on that pedal show, but he just bought one. Now he needs a Golden Boy. So
yeah.
There you go.
Ah, nice. Yes. I mean, need is an objective word, but I agree, you do need one. That is such a personal thing, and it's going to depend on so many things. Obviously, your guitar. It's going to depend on your amp. It also totally depends on your touch. Like, how hard do you hit the strings? For me, I like to mess with my tone, volume, and tone controls a lot while I play. So I'm constantly adjusting the volume. So I actually usually set my pedals to be kind of at the maximum amount of gain that I kind of need, so that when the volume is all the way up, it's as dirty as I want it to be. And then I just clean things up with the volume knob. And for that reason, I really struggle with pedals that don't clean up well. I very rarely am I ever with the volume and the tone all the way up. There's always, tones back a bit or whatever. So that's kind of how I set it. EQ, I'm looking at my 2-Rock right now, and the EQ is all at noon. The bass knob is, a couple of millimeters down from noon. My Fender amps, same thing. I'll have the treble usually around noon, and the bass just cut a tiny amount. Yeah.
Cool. So people want to know: Are you still using blue chip picks?
Oh wow. No, I haven't been using blue chips for a while. I think since I lost the last one,
I'm the same way.
It's like, oh man, that's,
exactly. When you do $40, it just disappears immediately. yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I meant to say that's a tough pill to swallow.
It's okay.
I was mixing up my idioms.
All right, looking over here. Oh, well, it's funny. We're just talking about amps and things, and you were talking about volume knobs and stuff. And you and Holger Notzel, who's a great guitar repair guy and a Comet amp owner, recommended these to me. The vintage inspired. I got to put them in. I'm going to put them in tonight. These are the volume pots and tone dials. Nice. I got a full set from my Les Paul, so I'm looking forward to throwing those in because those make a huge difference, which people kind of just forget or don't know that. The wiring and the pots and the capacitors make a massive difference in the sound.
Huge difference, like frustratingly big difference. The way the pickups are going to feel. When I told you the story yesterday, Jeff, but when I put the VI pots in this guitar, Alex, the guy who built it, I was playing in Edmonton, and he said, "Hey, I got these pots. I'd love to try them in Goldie. Do you want me to throw them in?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And he said, "Well, do you want to wait until the next day after the gig?" And I said, "Nah, I don't care. I'm
whatever. Just throw it in. Yeah.
I'm not. Yeah, exactly." And so we sound checked, and I ran over to his place, threw the pots in, and got up on stage, and it was like I was playing a completely different guitar. It was super exciting. Like, it wasn't a bad thing. It wasn't like, oh my God, what have I done? But it was like, oh man, the dynamic of the pickup. And I don't really understand what's going on electronically between the pots, like what the impedance load is exactly doing on the pickup. But they just felt so much more open and clear. And then the actual taper of the pot is different and feels different.
It's happened for a few months now, and I just haven't gotten around to it. And that's what we're talking about. I'm like, all right, that's tonight. That's what I'm going to do. I can't say I can't go out and do anything, so I'll change my pots, There's a...
Well, let me know. Let me know what you think once you get them in. I'm curious.
Okay, can you talk about G3 and what it meant to you playing in your performances? That's from Michael Finucane. Did you do G3?
G3?
No. Okay, I don't know. I didn't think so. Okay, no. Michael Cope is.
That's the Satriani thing, right?
All right. Well,
G3.
No, I didn't think you did that.
No.
I wish. Yeah,
oh my
right.
God, I wish I did G3. Well, in my mind, when I played at G3, everybody loved it, and Satriani was like, "Here's a check for $100,000."
Yeah. All right.
It's like, I need you to give me some guitar lessons, and I said, "Satch, that's ridiculous."
Please, look, you could have taken.
Yeah, no. If Satriani is out there watching,
you take the answer. Dude, just don't bother me.
Yeah. Come on. I lose my number,
All right,
Joe.
Michael Cope is asking, actors say their job isn't to feel necessarily, but to make the audience feel. When Joey performs, does he think he has to get in a certain headspace to emote? It's a good question. Yeah. That's
a great question. I definitely believe in that. I feel like the more than anything, just being present is really important. And those are the times when you're really present, you're not thinking about anything else. You're not being distracted by what scale should I use, or maybe I should try this weird chord. When you're just making music from as pure a place as you can, those are always the times when I leave going, that was magical. So if there's any headspace I'm trying to get in, I'm just trying to be focused and in the moment.
I think that's like a muscle that you have to build as well, because as guitar players and performers and practiceaholics and all those things, you get so obsessed about the things you can do, or I find you have to calibrate for how you're doing that night, right? Like, okay, this ain't happening tonight, so I'm just not going to do that. I just got to roll with what's going on. And sometimes those can be the best nights because you're just accepting, I've got to create a moment with what I have. And when I look at things that way, I find it's a much better performance than when I'm in my own head going too much. And I just have to remind myself that I just got to cut out of that thought. So just a few things like house cleaning. You mentioned Little Feat. Next week we have Scott Sherrard on the show, who's playing with Little Feat. Cool. And Scott's going to be on it. The following week is Robin Ford's coming on. Looking forward to that. Yeah, so that's in 2 weeks. Robin's going to come on, and I'm going to give him a hard time. And then I think I talked to Josh. Josh is going to come on. I got to go back up with him. And Josh. Yeah.
Josh Smith.
And
beautiful. That's going to be great.
Who else? We got Corey Congilio, Brett Papa, James Hogan. A bunch of my True Fire friends and great players. So we're spreading the love. So I'm super psyched about that. Too cool. All right, so I just want to kind of wrap it up pretty soon. I don't want to take up too much any more of your time. What kind of frets? Guitar Magic wants to know what slides do. Do you jack up the action, or what's your action like, or is it the strings heavy enough that?
The strings are really heavy. The action is also, I don't know. It feels normal to me, but I think it's about medium height. I don't know. Can you see that? It's not super high. It's not like an inch off the fretboard. I don't have a measuring guy, whatever those things are called. I don't have a ruler to measure, but they're not massively up the frets. But just lots and lots of time with the slide on. That's always my best advice. Is the more time you spend playing slide, the better your touch gets, and that's really the key. Somebody like Derek Trucks uses 11s and very normal action, and so his ability to keep those noises down is just pure finesse. So it's the craziest it's just touch. And I'm a bit meat-handed, so that's why for me heavy strings and a little bit raised action is because I just dig in.
And plus, when you're singing,
I don't know why, but I just dig in pretty hard.
Be there, like you don't have. There's another variable I think that I know would freak me out. And the thing that I've noticed, I know this is kind of, if you could see my messy desk, I've got 4 slides on it, because they all sound kind of different, right? And like for my National, I can't play the one I play on my Les Paul. Like I don't have a set. I don't set up my electrics for slide. So for me, when I play slide on them, I have to use a lighter slide, and my National, which has got the heavy strings on it, I use the heavier slide. So it's just a little nerd comment.
Yeah. Oh, I should also mention I do have a signature slide as well. That was one of the links. A company called The Rock Slide out of Spokane, Washington, and I've been working with those guys. They were the very first company to take me on as an artist, and very deep love for Danny Songhurst and his family. But they make great sounds.
Is there anything else? I don't want to keep it. I think we're kind of wrap it up. We've been on for an hour and a half. Thank you so much. And there's still a lot of people hanging in. So I just want to give the other thing, of course, the way to help Joey out is to buy his stuff, just to be honest. With musicians, that's how we make our living. So we have the tip jar. People have been very generous. So thank you so much. And of course, go to Bandcamp, which is the best way for us as musicians to make money if you want to, and buy the record. I know you all can stream it, but someone like place like Bandcamp, we see that money right away. We get it in our PayPal ASAP. That's a direct thing for me. My TrueFire courses. Do you have any instructional material out yet?
I don't have anything out there, but I do offer some lessons. So if people are interested,
so grab those, and then I can hook you up with TrueFire if you want to start talking to them too, which would be.
I have actually talked to TrueFire, and we just haven't made it happen. But it's gonna happen.
Great, because the way you explain it is spectacular. And I know Ariel has done one. I know obviously your connection with the old band with Ariel, and so, and then you have online lessons, right? And then you have the pedal. So all that information's in a link. And
yes.
Any final questions? And we'll just kind of call it a day. But it's been great, man.
It's such a pleasure. Thanks for having me, Jeff.
I'm looking at the questions. There's some kind of repeat people just coming in. So thank you so much, Joey, man. This has been awesome. I really appreciate it. So next week, once again, is going to be Scott Sherrard on the show. He plays with Little Feat. Also, certainly, he played with Greg Allman. Thinking Sly. Greg Allman for quite some time. And then after that is Robin Ford. And hopefully, I'm going to see if Josh can do the following week. That would be kind of fun. All right, man. Thanks so much, and all the best to you, and stay safe. And thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you. Ring the bell and chime in and subscribe, and this really helps me get the channel bigger. It gets out more. We get more people in and all this stuff. I really appreciate all the support you guys have given me, and I will see you soon. And special thanks to Phil Mingan, of course, who is running the chat. I can't do this without you. Thank you so much, Phil. Really helpful. All right. Thanks, Joey. All right, take it easy.
Thanks,
Joey.
Phil.
See you soon, man. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Jeff. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.